If you hear this, don't turn it off. Whatever you do, don't change the station. Thunder cracks. A child's laughter fades into a scream. The dial stops at 6:66 a.m. They were an ordinary family looking for a fresh start. The Moores, Daniel, his wife Rachel, and their two children, Lila and Ethan, had driven for miles into the heart of nowhere. Their new home sat at the edge of the forest in a small, forgotten town called Hollow's End, a place not found on modern maps. Daniel, a freelance sound engineer, had found the house for next to nothing. It came with a fully equipped recording studio in the basement, a dream come true. He imagined making his podcasts, recording eerie soundscapes, and finally leaving behind the noise of city life. But the silence of Hollow's End was not peaceful. It was too quiet, as if the world itself held its breath. The first night. Rachel unpacked the boxes, humming softly, while Ethan played with his toy cars. Lila, curious and fearless at 12, wandered into the basement. That's when she found it, the radio. It was old, built of wood and brass, its dials worn smooth by decades of use. On its front was a single strange marking, a symbol resembling an eye carved above the numbers on the frequency dial. When Daniel plugged it in, the speakers crackled to life. Static. Endless static. Then, faintly, a voice. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can anyone hear me? Daniel smiled. Must be an old ham radio signal. Someone playing around on the airwaves. But Rachel frowned. At this hour? It was 2 in the morning. The sound wasn't local. The voice had a strange distortion, low, like it was speaking from underwater, or from beneath the ground. The next morning, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the voice. He tuned the radio again. At first, nothing. Then, at precisely 6 minutes past 6, the static shifted. You're listening to frequency 666 AM. The voice that never sleeps. The family stared at one another. Tonight's program, The House That Listened. And then, chillingly, the voice began to describe their home, room by room, exactly as it looked now. Daniel laughed nervously. It's a coincidence. Must be some kind of local folklore broadcast. But Rachel noticed something. Daniel, it's describing the basement. The one we just finished unpacking. The voice continued. In the basement, a man stands beside an old radio, wondering if what he hears is real. The power went out. The radio stayed on. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. She heard whispers through her wall, faint and rhythmic, like someone tuning a station just beyond hearing range. Lila, are you awake? She thought it was her brother. But Ethan was sound asleep in the next room. The whisper came again, closer. We can hear you, can you hear us? Lila screamed. Daniel ran in, nothing but silence filled the room. The whispering stopped. In the morning, Lila refused to go near the radio. She said the static was breathing. Daniel checked the equipment, thinking maybe there was a feedback loop or interference from nearby transmitters. But Hollow's End didn't have any radio stations. No towers. No signal at all. Only one frequency worked, 666 AM. Daniel decided to record the broadcast. He left a tape running overnight. The next morning, when he played it back, it wasn't what he remembered. There was no broadcast. No voice. No static. Just breathing. Slow. Heavy. Human. Then, faintly. You shouldn't have listened. He rewound the tape. The same message repeated, but this time, in his own voice. Rachel begged him to stop. She wanted to throw the radio away. But when Daniel unplugged it, it kept playing. The lights flickered, and Ethan's toy cars began to move across the floor by themselves, circling as if drawn by invisible hands. That night, the family huddled together in the living room as the voice on the radio spoke once more. "You've tuned in now. You belong to the frequency." The days following the first broadcast felt unnatural. Daniel tried to continue unpacking, but something about the house seemed wrong. Time felt stretched. The clocks would skip minutes, then hours, then restart from the beginning. Rachel caught her reflection in the mirror one morning, except the reflection didn't move when she did. Its eyes twitched toward her a moment later, delayed. And in the basement, the radio was still humming softly, though no one had turned it on. Lila had stopped speaking altogether. She sat near the window for hours, staring into the woods behind the house. Ethan would ask, "What are you looking at?" She'd whisper, "They're talking out there." But there was nothing outside, just trees swaying in the wind. That night, Daniel set up his microphones, determined to find a logical explanation. He wanted to prove that the strange transmissions were nothing but frequency interference. He recorded for 6 straight hours. When he listened to the playback, he realized something horrifying. The recording captured voices between the static, not words, but names. His. Rachel's. Lila's. Ethan's. Each name was repeated slowly, rhythmically, as though chanted. And after the last name, the voice whispered, "Now, let's listen closer." Then came the silence. But it wasn't empty. It vibrated. Daniel described it later as dead air that breathes. At 6:16 in the evening, the radio turned on by itself again. This time, the voice wasn't distant. It was inside the room. "Welcome back to Frequency 666 AM. Tonight's story, The Man Who Listened Too Long." Rachel shouted, "Stop it. Whoever you are, stop." The voice replied, perfectly calm. "Rachel, you shouldn't yell. The microphones don't like loud noises." The family froze. Daniel unplugged the power cord. The light on the dial faded, but the sound didn't stop. The voice grew softer, but closer, as though whispering directly into Daniel's ear. "He's here now. Behind you." Daniel turned. Nothing. Only his reflection, pale and trembling, in the dusty studio window. But in the reflection, the radio dial was still glowing. The youngest, Ethan, became obsessed with the static. He'd sit in front of the radio for hours, turning the knobs and humming along with the noise. Rachel found him one morning drawing strange circles on the walls, concentric loops like radio waves, with the number 6 written over and over. When she asked what he was doing, he smiled and said, "They said if I draw their signal, they'll talk to me clearer." Rachel grabbed the chalk and wiped the symbols off the wall. That's when the radio shrieked, a piercing sound that made the windows crack and the lights explode in a flash. Ethan collapsed. For a moment, the house was completely still. Then the voice returned, calm as ever. "Don't erase the connection." Daniel took the old cassette tape he'd recorded days earlier, the one that had his own voice whispering back. He smashed it apart in anger. But that night, when he returned to the basement, the tape was back, fully intact, resting on top of the radio. Except now, the label read, "Playback 2." He pressed play. The voice that came through wasn't his anymore. It was Rachel's. "Daniel, if you're hearing this, I'm already gone." He froze. "Rachel? What the hell is this?" The voice continued, her tone hollow and distant. "He's watching you through the static. Don't listen. Don't." The tape ended abruptly with a scream. He ran upstairs. Rachel was standing at the sink, her eyes blank, humming softly to the tune of the radio's static, though it wasn't playing. That night, Lila woke again. She heard a faint scratching sound, not in the walls, but under the floorboards. She pressed her ear against the ground. The sound was rhythmic, like tapping in Morse code. When she spelled it out, the message was simple: let us out. The floor beneath her vibrated, soft at first, then violently shaking, knocking over her lamp. Daniel rushed in and pulled her away. The floorboards bulged, splitting slightly, and from the crack rose a thin wisp of black smoke. It smelled like burning wires and something metallic, something alive. Then the radio upstairs began to play again, by itself. This concludes tonight's broadcast. Tune in tomorrow, for the hollow signal. The dial clicked off. The smoke vanished. The silence returned. But none of them could sleep. Because the silence wasn't empty anymore. It listened back. The morning after the dead air broadcast, the Moore family decided they'd had enough. Daniel loaded the kids into the car while Rachel gathered their remaining things. The plan was simple: leave Hollow's End and never look back. But when they turned onto the only road leading out of town, the car radio, though off, began to hum. The signal found them again. Leaving already? The story's not over yet. The voice cut through every frequency, no matter what Daniel tuned. Even when he ripped the radio from the dashboard, the sound came from inside the speakers, the metal vibrating with a low growl. The trees lining the road blurred as fog rolled in, thicker than smoke. When the fog cleared, they were right back where they started. Back at the house. Rachel ran to the neighbor's house across the dirt road, desperate for help. She pounded on the door, but no one answered. Through the window, she saw people, frozen in place. An entire family sitting at a dinner table, unmoving, their eyes open and faces pale as porcelain. Their mouths were slightly open, as if listening. The radio on their counter was tuned to 666 AM. It wasn't playing sound anymore, only silence that pulsed like a heartbeat. When Rachel leaned closer, one of the figures, the mother, suddenly turned her head, slow and unnatural, and whispered, "You can't leave the signal." Rachel screamed and ran back to the Moore house. That night, Daniel sat in the basement with the radio again. He couldn't help himself. He wanted answers. He turned the dial, and the familiar static greeted him like an old friend. "Welcome back, Daniel." The voice was clearer now, human, almost gentle. "You've been chosen to carry the hollow signal. You record. You transmit. You listen." He shouted, "What are you?" The voice laughed, distorted, layered, as though 1,000 people laughed through the same mouth. "We are the echo of everything left unsaid. We are the static between the living and the lost." The basement lights flickered. From the ceiling above, Rachel and the children could hear Daniel's voice overlapping with the broadcast, repeating the same words in perfect synchronization. He wasn't just listening anymore. He was transmitting. Lila dreamed that night. In her dream, she stood in a field of radios, each one whispering softly in the darkness. Their dials all glowed red. A man with no face approached her. He spoke without moving his mouth. "When the signal reaches everyone, the static will stop. But to stop it, you must silence the listener." She woke up screaming, her ears bleeding slightly. On her pillow lay a small piece of paper, old and yellowed, written in unfamiliar handwriting. "Tune to the truth." Daniel spent the next day sealing the basement door. He nailed boards across it, taped wires, and poured salt along the threshold. Anything to stop the sound. But at exactly 6:66 p.m., the time didn't make sense, but the clock displayed it anyway. The board splintered outward. The radio began to broadcast across every speaker in the house. The television, the baby monitor, even Rachel's cell phone. Each voice spoke in perfect unison. "The hollow signal is open." The air in the room shimmered. The family felt pressure in their skulls, like invisible hands pressing from within. Ethan began to hum again, that same low-frequency tone. When Daniel shouted for him to stop, Ethan's voice shifted. He spoke, but it wasn't him speaking. "Dad, you're too late. The broadcast isn't coming from the radio anymore. It's coming from us." Rachel fell to her knees, sobbing. The lights went out. Only the glow of the red dial remained, though the radio sat smashed to pieces on the floor. Lila, desperate, tore through Daniel's notebooks, his frequency logs, his recordings, anything that could explain what was happening. In one of the pages, she found a map, crude, drawn in ink, showing the entire town of Hollow's End covered in intersecting circles, like radio waves overlapping. In the center of those waves, their house. Written at the bottom of the page, in handwriting she didn't recognize. Receiver found. Transmission stable. Awaiting final resonance. Her hands trembled as she turned the page. On the next sheet was a drawing of 4 figures, their family, each with hollow, static-filled eyes. Underneath, it read, "When the 4th broadcast ends, they will hear you forever." As midnight approached, the house groaned like it was alive. Wind howled outside, though the trees didn't move. The air inside vibrated with invisible energy, the walls hummed, the floorboards shook, and every breath they took felt heavy. Then, it all stopped. For one moment, complete stillness. Rachel whispered, "Is it over?" And then came the softest voice imaginable, crawling through the dark. "You can't silence the air." The windows shattered. The sound was deafening, not from volume, but from pressure, like silence collapsing in on itself. And in that instant, every device in the house whispered the same final words in perfect unison. "Prepare for the final broadcast." The night after the 3rd broadcast was the longest the Moores ever lived through, though it's unclear if it ever truly ended. The clocks in the house had stopped at 666, a time that didn't exist, and yet, the day never changed. The sun didn't rise. The entire world outside their window looked trapped between seconds. The fog no longer moved. Even the trees had gone still. It was as if the frequency had paused reality itself. The radio, though shattered, began to hum once more, the glow returning, brighter than ever before. The voice spoke calmly, soothingly. "This is it. The end of the story. Are you ready to listen?" Rachel covered her ears. Lila clung to her brother. Daniel stood frozen in front of the broken device. "Don't listen," Rachel begged. "Please, Daniel, don't." But Daniel whispered, almost entranced, "If I understand it, maybe we can end it." He pressed his hand against the splintered wood of the radio cabinet. The static surged like wind. "Welcome to the final transmission." The sound filled the entire house, but this time, it didn't come from the radio. It came from the walls. Every photograph, every reflective surface, every shadow began to ripple. Faces formed, their own faces, whispering their words back at them seconds after they spoke. Rachel screamed as her reflection smiled without her. "You see," the voice said. "The broadcast is reflection. You listen to yourself, until there's nothing left but the echo." Lila's reflection stepped out of the mirror, grainy, flickering like a broken television signal. It looked at her, tilting its head. "You dreamed this, didn't you? You brought it here." The real Lila shook her head, but the reflection whispered. "It doesn't matter. We are all frequencies, waiting to be tuned." Then, it smiled, wide, unnatural, before fading back into glass. Daniel turned back to the radio, his eyes distant. He realized something in that moment: the frequency wasn't trying to hurt them. It was trying to merge with them. All the recorded voices, all the broadcasts, they weren't ghosts. They were imprints. Echoes of everyone who had ever listened. The radio wasn't a receiver. It was a collector. "It records consciousness," Daniel muttered. "Every listener adds to the signal." The voice answered, gentle, approving. Now you understand. To silence the broadcast, you must become part of it. Rachel grabbed Daniel's arm. No. You're not sacrificing yourself for this. But the static rose around them like a storm. Ethan's toys rolled across the floor again, forming a perfect circle around the broken radio. The voice spoke to the children now. Would you like to hear the rest of the story? Ethan whispered, yes. Rachel screamed, no. The air around them pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and the lights flickered out completely. In total darkness, the voice spoke for the final time. Transmitting consciousness, now. Neighbors, what few were left in Hollow's End, reported seeing a red glow from the Moore house that night. Then, nothing. When authorities arrived days later, they found the house empty. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Only a faint hum echoing through the walls, a frequency too low for most to hear. In the basement, the old radio sat on the table, perfectly intact, though covered in dust. The dial glowed faintly, frozen at 6:66 a.m. A cassette tape rested beside it. The label read, Playback 4, the final transmission. When played, it revealed only static, until, faintly, a voice whispered. If you're hearing this, you've already tuned in.